Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MassDOT's first Safe Routes to School webinar of 2023. Today, we'll be discussing grant writing, sharing tips and tricks for making your application stand out, and connecting you to grant resources from MassDOT and beyond. Just a few reminders about the session. Please put all questions in the chat, and we will address them during the Q&A. And to see text captions on the screen, please enable live transcript using your Zoom menu. This session is being recorded and will be on the Safe Routes to School website shortly. And in a few minutes, I'll have Leon paste a copy of the presentation into the chat. My name's Diane Hansen, and I am the Safe Routes to School Program Director. Today, I'm joined by Miranda Bersenio, the Federal Programs Coordinator for MassDOT. Miranda may be a newer face to some of you as she joined MassDOT in the early fall of 2022. She is our Safe Routes to School Program Coordinator at MassDOT. Also presenting today is Rachel O'Donnell, our Program Administrator. Before I go into the agenda, I do want to share with you the reasoning behind this topic. In the fall, when we were reviewing Signs and Lines project submissions, and more recently with infrastructure applications, we noticed that folks were still not following instructions, reading the guidance documents, or submitting all the pieces we asked for. So in addition, we wanted to explore the providing technical assistance with grant writing in the future, so that we'll be asking for your feedback on that later in the webinar. So those are really the two reasons for this topic. But what we want to do is begin with a few questions for you to see who's joining us today and asking your thoughts about grant writing. Then we'll generally talk about the process and timeline for writing grants, tips for making your project stand out, and resources for writing and finding both federal and local grants. We'll close with Q&A and also take questions live in the chat. So please put your questions in the chat as you think of them. Okay, we're going to do our opening polls. So let's get started. Leon, can you bring up the first poll? This question is, who is your outreach coordinator? And I'm going to go over to this screen and you can see the lovely faces of our team, of our outreach coordinators here in the areas that they represent. So Leon, if you could pull up the poll, there we go, perfect. Let's see. Okay, getting some good responses. Okay, it looks like we are having representation from almost every territory, which is fantastic. I'm going to leave this open for a little bit longer. We've got almost 60% of you participating in the poll. So if you haven't selected yet, or you don't know who that person is, we'll keep the map up. Okay. Few more seconds. All right. Leon, if you could share the results of the poll. Okay. And you can see we have folks joining us from all over the state, which is great. I'm going to go back to the slide and we're going to go to our second question, which is, what is your role or title in relation to your interactions with Safe Routes to School? So Leon, if you could close that poll, and perfect. We have some options here. And if none of these options fit you, you're certainly welcome to put yours in the chat as well. Not surprisingly, I'm seeing a lot coming in from municipal government. This is our webinar for municipalities, so it does make sense that we are seeing a lot more folks join us from municipal government. So glad to have you all here. See some parents and caregivers as well, which is great. Okay, we're going to leave this open for another 30 seconds. I'm seeing good participation on here, almost at 70% of you answering the poll. Hopefully this is getting you warmed up for the topic. Okay, Leon, do you want to go ahead and close out the poll and share the results? Okay, great. So nearly 70% of the folks joining us today are from municipal government. And last poll question, what is your interest in today's topic? So poll number 3. So were you learning Wanted to learn more about what Safe Routes is looking for, just find out more about grants, all of the above. Interested in technical assistance. Good, the response. So it seems like you're all warmed up because the responses are now coming in fast and furious. I love it. Okay, we'll keep this open for about another 15 seconds or so. Okay. And it looks like the majority, and if Leon, if you want to close out of this one, the majority of folks are interested in all of the above and also wanting to know what we're looking for in a grant application. So perfect. We do hope to address all of these today. And you can go ahead and if it's still open on your screen, you can close it out. We're going to try something new today. And this is your last question. If everyone can open just a separate browser on their phone or on their computer and go to menti.com, that's menti.com. Rachel is going to share her screen and there is a code on Menti. If you could see it up on the screen, it's going to ask you for that code. It's 2638-0905. Oh, Rachel, you're in incognito. There we go. Enter the code 2638-0905 and you can answer the question. When you first hear of a new grant opportunity or opportunities, what are your first thoughts? So just any words that come to mind. And we should start seeing some things pop up on the screen here. Yep. Good. And we're going to keep this open a little bit longer because I want to see as folks start to answer what's coming in here. Frustration. Yep. Competitive. Time frame, deadline, budget, hope. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you all have hope. Requirements is standing out. Yep. As the words get bigger, you'll see that multiple people have written those words in here. And if you see something on here that you're like, ooh, I should have written that, you can actually go back and you can enter it there too and put it to the front. So despair. Wow. We'll have to talk about that. Despair, risk, stress, qualifications. Okay, this is really interesting. And we will keep track of these words, but going into the presentation, think about how you're feeling with this and if there's any way that we can help maybe take some of the stress and frustration and some of these things, take that away, take the stress away and hopefully give you some pointers. So I appreciate everyone still entering this stuff. While we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen sharing and go back to my presentation. Okay, and if I can get a thumbs up from Rachel or Leon to make sure that you're seeing my slide.
Yep, you're good.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so don't close out of Menti because we are going to go back to a closing question on Menti. So just leave that browser aside and we'll come back to it and ask you a second question. So thank you for doing that. Hopefully it was fun and we'll kind of address some of those issues. So before we dive into Grant Writing 101, I do want to ground us on the purpose and the mission of Safe Routes to School. Our goal is to increase safe walking and rolling among public school students. We take a whole community approach to this program and focus on both health and safe transportation. In general, throughout this presentation, we'll be referencing the Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant, but a lot of the guidance and tips also work for other regional, state, and federal grants. So I want to talk about project eligibility. Of course, start by considering the improvements that are eligible for this grant. For the MassDOT Safe Routes Infrastructure Grant, consider shared use paths, traffic calming and speed reduction, bike and ped crossing improvements, and on-street facilities. Remember, these projects are not just sidewalk maintenance projects, which, by the way, we do see a lot of. And if we do see a project that's like, hey, these sidewalks aren't great, we just want to fix them, those projects really are eliminated from consideration because we do need to look at both bike and ped accommodations. These are also not meant for pavement maintenance or widening travel lanes. So, and avoid projects that are likely, that are at schools that are likely to close, merge, or relocate. In terms of scoring criteria, what project will score the best for this particular grant? Look at all the recommendations within your municipality to determine which is the best suited to this particular funding source. You should consider crash data, proximity to a school, and school equity demographics. Have you considered bundling projects? Are there multiple recommendations for a particular school or cluster of schools that would make sense for a single application? So think about the grant criteria. Can you maximize points with multiple recommendations, such as a location near a school and locate near multiple schools and locations on high speed or high crash roadways? Remember, not all projects need to score highly in all categories. Also, look at prior planning efforts. What safe routes recommendations are covered in your municipality's planning efforts, which will show well for community support criteria, and which projects have more data and background information already assembled to use in the grant application. If you're applying for MassDOT grants, this is an excellent time in the process to attend live webinars reviewing the grants or to review previously recorded webinars to get your questions answered. Other agencies may hold similar webinars or information sessions about their grants. It can be tempting to work on a grant in the order it's presented in the guidelines or in the order of information you'll have to input. However, there are a few items we recommend you thinking about as soon as you decide on the project you'll be submitting. Letters of support. Think about who you need these from and how many you'd like to request. Reach out to those folks so they have plenty of time to get approvals from a board or a larger group, and also consider offering to ghostwrite the letters and they can go ahead and just sign them. If your project abuts private land or residences, get letters of support from the neighborhood or specific community that will benefit from the project. Also, strong letters of support from the mayor or select board, police department, and Department of Public Works are also advisable. Sometimes we see letters from parents or guardians giving us a firsthand account of how their child is impacted by an unsafe route. These are really powerful stories that help paint a picture of the problem for the project selection committee. Here on the screen are two examples of letter support from Sturbridge, from the Sturbridge infrastructure project that was awarded last year. We have had a few recent requests to say, hey, well, what does make a good letter of support, or what does make a good project submission? So we wanted to throw these in here. And again, Leon can think on the next page. I have Leon going ahead and just putting a copy of the presentation in the chat. So you can actually reference this in a little bit. And maximizing your score. As I mentioned before, you should have selected projects that show well for the grant criteria. In this step, consider what else can you do to get as many points as possible. Do you need to hold a community meeting, gather photos, or develop a design plan or cost estimate? These are good to get started right away. Also consider the points breakdown as a guidance for your level of effort on all of the grant sections. Spend longer on the higher scoring sections to round out your argument. And lastly, securing a match. Does the grant require a cash or in-kind match? This could be a make or break for your application. So start thinking through what approvals you need. Specifically, the Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Grant does not require a match, but many other grants will. As a reminder, the infrastructure grant may have additional costs like right-of-way acquisition or pavement maintenance, and the municipality is responsible for these costs on the Safe Routes infrastructure projects. With our Signs and Lines grants, this is a reimbursement-based grant, so you may need to get prior permission to spend municipal funds before getting reimbursed. In reading through the entire application before filling it out, it can help you get prepared for what's to come. You may want to copy and paste the questions into a separate document so you can work on it on your own time and save as you go. Reading the whole application ahead of time can also give you a more holistic idea of what the grantors are looking for before you develop your answers. Remember, your scoring team is looking at many, many applications. So make it really easy for them to give you full points. To the extent that it makes sense, consider using the same language as in the scoring criteria to take any of the guesswork out for the project selection committee. The narrative of your grant is the area where you have the most ability to shine. So make it simple and clear. Tell the story of the problem you're trying to solve. Define the problem with data as much as possible by considering crash statistics, public feedback about concerns and near misses, and concerns from school staff. Consider recent crashes that may not be captured in the crash data, and you can always supplement with a police report in lieu of this official data. Identify gaps in the travel network and use travel survey data or outreach feedback to indicate that families would walk or would bike if the improvements were made in this area. Then show how the solutions have been selected to address the specific issue you're trying to solve. Refer to MassDOT or national research that links proven safety countermeasures to the problems you're trying to solve. See the link on the bottom right from proven safety countermeasures from the Federal Highway Administration. These are some more examples from Sturbridge's application last year, and thank you to Paul Guerin for giving me permission to share some of his school's application, including the letters of support from a few slides ago. Here's their project description that is very specific to what they're requesting and why. They're asking for a shared use path for bike ped accommodations and reducing the vehicle travel lane width. Below is another specific section of the application, and they're providing detailed examples of issues with speeding, lack of safe crossing, and lack of bike ped facilities. And now I'm going to pass the presentation along to Rachel to talk about some writing tips and common submission issues. Rachel?
Great. Thank you, Diane. So, it's always best to be thorough and make sure that you list any and all planning efforts that are linked in any way to your proposed project. And if you're applying to any grant, not necessarily Safe Routes to School grants, show project readiness by clearly defining roles and responsibilities for those next steps. The grant funder, whoever they may be, wants to see the funds used and those projects built. So you should give them that confidence that your team will be able to move along and build that project in a timely fashion. Address any potential challenges head on, talk about your plan for design work that still needs to be done or, utility relocation during construction. Show that your agency is ready and able to take that project on. And as always, we do recommend, just as writing styles, to avoid passive voice in grant applications. You want to be clear about who will be taking that task on. And, if at first you don't succeed, try again. If you're not successful in the first round, follow up with the grant administrator. Get your score and get a debrief if that's an option. There's no harm in asking if you don't know. Consider how you can maximize your score in a future round or seek funding for a project that's better set up for to be competitive. And finally, we can't stress this enough. Don't forget to use spell check. It's another reason to first draft your responses, maybe in a Word document, and then you can use that spell check tool. This helps prevent the funders from thinking the application was maybe done in a rushed manner or not much thought was put into it. Taking your time to ensure it looks good is always, always appreciated. And then over the last few years, we have seen certain issues with the Safe Routes to School application arise time and time again. So we just thought we'd list out a couple of those common mistakes or errors so that way moving forward, it's just more transparent. If you don't submit a map or photos of the project area, it does make it really difficult for those funders to visualize the area that you're talking about. They then have to maybe rely on Google Maps, and that could be a bit outdated. And then the other common issue is that there's no budget attached. With the Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant, that is a requirement. So when we don't see one attached, it's basically hard to move forward with that application. If there aren't any letters of recommendations from key stakeholders attached, how are the funders supposed to know if the community would be even on board with the project? We want the projects to move as smoothly and efficiently as possible, and community pushback would only hinder that process. Another key point that we see missing in a lot of submissions is a lack of data on student travel behavior. So schools know where their students live, but how are they getting to school? What are those common paths that they use every single day, or the trails or the routes that they use to get to and from school? And that does tie into our next point, is that if you don't know where the students or how the students are getting to and from school, how can you provide a clear recommendation in your application that would help improve their commute? And another common theme that we see in most applications is that we're only focusing on those pedestrians. We're not focusing on the bike or, the rolling accommodations. We want projects to move forward that consider the walkers and the rollers. And, when Diane mentioned Sturbridge's application, they included that multi-use path for pedestrians and bicyclists. Lastly, a good chunk of the points in the application is related to the school's involvement in the Safe Routes to School program. Do you participate in the walk to school days or have conducted pedestrian and bike safety trainings? Has your school done a family travel survey or conducted an arrival dismissal observation? All of these activities are taken into consideration when reviewing the project applications. And we want to see that there's a strong commitment to the program and that it's not just a money grab. The outreach coordinators are all on this call today and would be happy to help boost your Safe Routes to School participation. I believe my email was in the registration link or, at the bottom of the webinar. So if you reach out to me, I can absolutely connect you with your outreach coordinator to try and, get your participation boosted in your community. I think, Leon, do you mind posting a slide deck in the chat? I think now's a good time, probably. And I do know that that seemed like a lot of information to take in, but I do want to let you know that we do have some pre-recorded information sessions for both the Signs and Lines grant and the Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant. Those can be found on our website under the engineering page, and then there's a Signs and Lines section and an infrastructure section, and you can find the recordings in each of their sections. Using an estimating tool or taking estimates for other similar completed bid projects is important, and having a realistic and rough estimate of the project costs makes the selection committee feel more confident that the application was prepared carefully and thoughtfully. And what's great is that in Massachusetts, we have the State Aid Reimbursable Program Estimating Tool, also known as SARPIT. So it's a MassDOT tool. It's an estimating tool. It's easy to use and provides built-in escalations for inflation. They do recommend that you download a fresh copy of the estimating tool every time you want to use it, because they're constant, MassDOT is constantly updating the tool to make sure the prices are reflected, and any inflation taken into consideration. But now I would like to pass the presentation along to Miranda, who will be discussing grant resources and other grant opportunities available. Miranda?
Thanks, Rachel. Afternoon, everybody. Like Diane mentioned, I'm the Federal Programs Coordinator at MassDOT in our Office of Transportation Planning, and just wanted to first highlight some federal grant opportunities that are available to you. There's the RAISE and Safe Streets and Roads for All grant administered by the USDOT. I know we've had municipalities in the past apply and successfully receive funding through these programs. You're definitely encouraged to apply if this is something your community is interested in, but it's strongly recommended that you apply in coordination with your MassDOT district staff and your region's metropolitan planning organization, or MPO. And the Highway Safety Improvement Program, also called HSIP for short, is more of a formula-based program. And MassDOT staff work in collaboration across divisions to decide on the best way to leverage these funds to support improvements that align with Vision Zero. So some of you may have applied to our speed feedback program that was recently announced and closed earlier this month. That was funded through the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Next slide, please. Here are some high-level, grants that we have at the state. Some of these are MassDOT, some of these are not. I wanted to call attention to two MassDOT programs, the Complete Streets and Shared Streets and Spaces grant. The Complete Streets program is one that can help municipalities access funds for complete street type projects. A complete street is one that provides safe and accessible options for all travel modes, walking, biking, transit, and vehicles for people of all ages and all abilities. And so this program offers technical assistance and construction funding to eligible municipalities. To become eligible, you need to pass a complete streets policy and develop a prioritization plan. If you go to the website, you can get in contact with staff who can help walk you through this process. And some of you may know the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which was developed during COVID to address pandemic-related impacts on mobility, and has since grown and opened multiple rounds with various categories. We haven't announced a new round yet, but we know that it is extremely popular and as a quick build program similar to the Safe Routes to School Signs and Lines grant program. So these projects are more things that you are ready to put together and just need some funding for. Next slide, please. And these are just some other, national or regional grant programs that we wanted to highlight. And again, these slides are dropped in the chat and will get sent out afterwards. So if you're interested in applying, please consider these. And also just wanted to contextualize more of the Safe Routes to School sort of grant funding and the funding in general for the program. So the USDOT allocates funding to the Transportation Alternatives Program for each state, and Safe Routes to School is packaged under Transportation Alternatives. So every year MassDOT gets our TAP funding, and our Safe Routes to School amount is programmed to fund our Safe Routes to School team and staff, like Diane and her team with all the outreach coordinators, as well as using that funding to support our grant programs like our Signs and Lines and infrastructure grants. For those that have submitted grants in the past, particularly our infrastructure program, I'm sure you've noticed that there are lots of nuances and different guidelines for these projects. That's because of the federal and state funding that are put to these projects. We are required to, adhere to certain compliance and engineering directives. And with all that in mind, today we really wanted to discuss with you the idea of our technical assistance offering for applicants interested in our Safe Routes to School grant programs. I had floated this idea when I first started at MassDOT because I, in a previous role, worked at the municipal level and quickly came to learn that there are varying degrees of staff capacity and abilities to apply for and receive grant funding. And when I came to the MassDOT and started to review applications, it became clear that smaller communities might not have the same resources, or staff capacity may be extremely limited in other communities. So this idea sort of came off of the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which offered technical assistance in their most recent round, and building on our one of the Safe Routes to School E's, equity. We look to prioritize equity when we're reviewing applications, but how do we begin to build equity in earlier in the process by ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to apply and submit a really strong and great grant application. So technical assistance for grant writing can look a lot of different ways. If you're looking to get some help with understanding what kind of information each question is looking to get, if you're looking for help to brainstorm a good project for one grant program over another, etc. So we just wanted to start this dialogue with you all, especially during a time that there's not an open grant application, so we're not anxious or stressed at all, and we can help develop a really solid technical assistance offering for you all. So now I'll turn it over to Diane. I know she has some questions to help get this conversation started.
Yes, thank you, Miranda. So we're going to go back to the polls and ask a few questions in Zoom and then come back to Menti. So Leon, if you could pull up the next poll question, which is, would your municipality take advantage of technical assistance for grant writing? Okay, I see mostly yeses, some maybes. Surprisingly, no nos. We're at about 50% participation in the poll so far, so we'll keep it open for about another 15 seconds or so. I'm actually curious when we do go to the Q&A for the folks that are saying maybe. I want to know what the maybe or the not sure. What would be the hesitation, or maybe you already have existing grant writing staff. So for any brave souls that be willing to come off mute when we get to Q&A to just share why you answered that way. Leon, if you could go ahead and close the poll and share the results. You can see here. Okay, great. We're going to go to the next question, which is what kind of grant writing assistance would be most helpful? And this is really referencing the points that Miranda had on her slide that she just mentioned, which is understanding the questions, helping with budgeting, project selection. And if you did put other, I see a few folks putting other, you can put that in the chat too, or come off mute when we go into Q&A and just tell us, give us some ideas. Maybe you've received technical assistance for grant writing for some other opportunities, and we'd like to hear what was useful and what wasn't maybe. Okay. And we're at about 60% participation on the poll right now. Largest numbers coming in for guidance on appropriate supporting materials. And I'm really happy to hear that, because it's definitely something that we've seen folks struggle with when they're submitting their applications. So Leanne, I think we can close the poll and take a look at the results. Okay, so budget is second after supporting materials. Okay, great. Thank you all for answering those. And now we're going to go one more time into Menti. So go back to your browser, and Rachel's going to share her screen that believe it should be the same code. So you shouldn't even have to enter anything unless you closed out of that browser. And Rachel, are you able to share Menti?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the Chrome. All of a sudden, Chrome disappeared on me. Oh, there it goes. Okay. We are good.
Okay, so here is our last word cloud. We're
Yeah.
going to go to the next question.
People were submitting extra
Oh,
answers to this.
I
So I
love
thought
it.
I'd just, show the final before I move on to the next one.
Great. Last question. What do you struggle with the most when completing a grant application? Yep, coordinating with others. That's a big one. I definitely see a lot of scrambling at the end towards the deadline, making sure that you're getting feedback from, the municipalities or DPW, cost estimates, timelines. Yep. So cost estimates, coordination, those are kind of showing up as some of the big ones. Yep. So we're going to let this word cloud continue. We'll keep it up here. And I think what I'd like to do now is open it up and go to the Q&A. So I did see that some things came into the Q&A, and I will try and answer those. And if we can have Miranda also back, see if we can make sure both of us can answer these. The first question is, well, where can I find the recorded meeting? So if we will have it online within the next week or so, the recording. And if you weren't unable to get to download the actual PDF, we can certainly email it to you. Just reach out and we can send you an email of that. So the next question from Walker is, can you combine adding a sidewalk multi-use path on a main road with upgrades to the road? So if it's specifically related to a grant, so we'll use the Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant, that has a fairly long time span from the award to actual construction. So, and Miranda, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are planning to do those upgrades, we can certainly coordinate or have the construction, the Safe Routes to School program construction coincide with that. I think it definitely makes sense because there's so much time to plan. It can absolutely be done at the same time. That would be my response. No. You're good with that, Miranda? Okay. Jen asks, have the infrastructure recipients been announced yet? Getting questions from Newton. So I believe letters are going out shortly, right, Miranda? So no, Jen, they have not been announced yet, but we're so close.
Yes, we're waiting on an official signature, and they will be going out hopefully before the end of the week.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Will the slide deck be emailed? Yes, we talked about that. Let's see here, other setting up. Okay, so this was in response to what other things could technical assistance provide? And so setting up or preparing preliminary design costs and estimates. Yep. And is there anyone on the call that wants to share why they maybe wouldn't use technical assistance? If you want to come off mute. Or you can type it in the chat too. Okay, I don't hear of anyone. Is there anyone who's used technical assistance before on another grant, like the shared streets and spaces, or any other? We're trying to actually pull together maybe the structure for technical assistance, and anything that any of you folks on the call can share with us would be really helpful. And Miranda, if anyone is thinking of getting off mute, do you have a sense of how many folks used technical assistance on the shared streets and spaces, or on any other ones you've worked on?
Let me check. I know that it was extremely used for the shared streets and spaces.
It
but
was used a lot.
yes, it was.
Oh,
There
okay.
was also, that one was a bit different since the Bar Foundation sort of ran that. But have spoken with the staff that runs that program and gotten some best practices.
Okay. And then Jeff just asked one question about TA would be timing related to grant. So Jeff, are you asking how far in advance you'd have to request technical assistance? Okay, yeah, that's a great question, and I think as we pull together the program for technical assistance, I think we'll definitely have to have a fair amount of time to in advance of when the grant gets released, or at least build that into the deadline for the grant. So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, if we are going to be providing technical assistance, we want to make sure that we give you enough time to work with us, and then also to get everything together that you need for the grant. So thanks, Jeff. Great question. Has anyone else used technical assistance for grant writing? And if not, no worries. Looking at, we are at about 40 minutes in, and what we can do is certainly leave the chat open and let people ask questions, or we kind of assume that we'd be at around the 45 minute mark for this webinar. So if you have any other questions about the presentation, please reach out to any of us or to your outreach coordinator. Otherwise, we definitely look forward to pulling together some technical assistance and support for our grants that we hope to launch again in the fall for Signs and Lines and for infrastructure. And as Miranda said, please look out for letters to those of you who did apply for infrastructure. Miranda, any last words?
Not that I can think of. You're always welcome to email us.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And we will have this presentation up online shortly, and reach out if you have any questions. Talk to you. Stay safe. The pending snowstorm. Talk to you all later.